Hi all, Rick here with a ship video once more. This time, however, we're branching into an alternate timeline, that of Star Trek Online's universe, with the first command of Captain Nog, the USS Chimera. While some ships were ported over to the main continuity of Star Trek, including the Odyssey-class Enterprise F, those choices were selective and fit with the general world of Trek. ST Online is a setting where tensions post-Dominion War persisted, and machinations from behind the scenes ensured that there was never a full-scale de-escalation of hostilities, especially between the Klingon Empire and Federation. Also, it's a video game setting which lends itself to competition and action more so than mapping and diplomacy missions. As such, some of the vessels created for that setting are more militaristic than things you would see in Prime continuity, barring the occasional Defiant-esque vessel. So, while the Reliant, Ross and Odyssey classes are natural integrations, something like the Destroyer-type Chimera is a little too aggressive to have more than a handful for the United Federation of Planets. But it's still a fantastic ship with a very nice design, so let's take a look. Hey, if it's a Star Trek Destroyer, does that make it a Chimera Star Destroyer? Or is that taken? In real life, the Chimera class was designed by Jason Lee for the same contest that resulted in the Odyssey class design. While not the winner, the design was later used as the Chimera class, a reward for players in the game. It received a visual update in 2023, and Lee oversaw that too. So, let's move on to its in-universe origin and lore. In the face of continual aggression from the Klingon Federation War of 2405, Starfleet had begun to ramp up on its military designs, eventually feeling forced to create ships specifically for that role, something the institution has always been reluctant to do. The Defiant class showed that they could create a dedicated battleship, and their historic designs, like the Galaxy and Sovereign, proved that powerful vessels could fit multi-role functions. The Klingons' withdrawal from the Khitmar Accords and heightened aggression had been warning signs for the UFP, and in 2405, when the Empire began open hostilities against the Federation again, Starfleet began Project Lotus. Project Lotus was a classified program by Starfleet Research and Development to create a powerful warship that was capable of engaging a variety of targets, something manoeuvrable enough to battle a bird of prey, but beefy enough to tackle a Nekfar warship or two. One of the higher-ups from the Advanced Ship Design Bureau was Commander Nog, who had been promoted off the Enterprise E, where he had been serving as Chief Engineer. His experience in both tactical fields and engineering gave him the insight into combating the Klingon Empire, and the Chimera was in part his brainchild. The vessel spent 2 years in development, with the core new focus being the dynamic tactical system, and the prototype USS Chimera NX-97400 was completed in 2407, ready for field testing. As the primary designer, Nog was promoted to captain and assigned to command the ship that he had been working on for that time. The vessel proved itself and even entered into actual combat engagements, but a concern had come to light in its construction, that it was simply too complex a ship to make quickly, and it needed dedicated care and maintenance to continue, a problem shared by the earlier Defiant class. As mentioned, the vessel was classified a heavy destroyer, but the focus had been on keeping it surprisingly nimble for its size. It was 458.7 metres long, not exactly a colossal ship, but still pretty big for a battleship. This makes it 204 wide and 91.3 metres tall. It carried a crew of 450 people. In terms of engine output, the ship retained a matter-antimatter warp core, which could reach speeds of warp 9.99, but cruised at around warp 8. It featured a 4-nacelle design, which offloaded the stress of continual high warp factors between the pairs, and oversized warp plasma regulator assemblies managed the flow between them, kind of giving it a 4-wheel drive of warp travel. These nacelles would actually angle and extend slightly when the drive was engaged, essentially allowing for a slight form of variable warp geometry and to reduce the nacelle's profile when not in use, as combat was expected in this class. The pylons were also hinged to aid in this. Under the saucer was a dedicated quantum slipstream burst drive, which was in the process of becoming standard use in this timeline. A dedicated sprint that on average allowed for about half an hour of travel before requiring a 12-hour cooldown, reset and retune. In terms of impulse drives, this is where things get a little hectic, as you can see why it was considered a little complex. It had 18 impulse exhausts, and even if some of these shared a reactor, it shows just why this thing was so nimble, and presumably power hungry. Each nacelle pylon had 3 atop and below that were angled for manoeuvrability, and one rear-facing one for additional thrust. Then there are the main saucer, where 4 main impulse reactors were, so when needed, this thing could fly. Now, for a warship kind of deal, you might expect more firepower, but it only had 9 Type 12 phaser strips. However, these strips provided ample firing arcs, so the number of emitters is not always indicative of a power level. In terms of torpedo launchers, it carried 4, 2 fore and 2 rear facing. These were multi-purpose for probes, photons and quantum torpedoes. There were also 4 phaser cannon placements across the front of the saucer. It contained 2 hidden phaser arrays, which were part of the dynamic tactical system, and where this ship really shines. It was also the primary reason the vessel was regarded as too complex to mass produce. The DTS enabled the ship to restructure the main hull into a tactical configuration, realigning power systems to dedicate everything to its main arrays. The superstructure reorganises along magnetic rails, EPS nodes and flexi conduits, revealing 2 phaser rails, which were the beginning of Project Lotus. The firepower unleashed from these has been compared to the theoretical phaser lulls, which has not yet come to fruition in the Prime continuity, but was in an alternate future Enterprise D's main canon. The downside to exposing this weapon is twofold. It drains power from every other system to fire, so that vaunted manoeuvrability is lost, let alone shield integrity. The second problem is that these big glowing rails are sensitive pieces of equipment that have a lot of power running through them. Having these struck risks a massive discharge that could blow apart the saucer section. Nevertheless, it accomplishes the objective that the Chimera class can definitely handle ships both small and large, making it a very variable battleship. It also featured a tachyon inverter beam, which was an interesting bit of kit located below the main deflector that siphoned off shield strength of a target, then used it to reinforce the Chimera's shields. However, this could not be used in conjunction with the Lotus array, as both were demanding systems. The system was bolstered by a regenerative shield array. Now, all shields are regenerative, but we've heard this term before on things like the Scimitar class, so I assume it's basically notably faster than standard shielding. In terms of auxiliary craft, it had an upper shuttle bay and a lower one. Now, as a Starfleet vessel, it does come with an astute sensor suite, and the large deflector array is useful for a variety of other purposes, but that's hardly unique for a Starfleet design. It is clear that this ship was designed for combat, much like the Defiant, and coupled with the complexity of the DTS system, we can see why it was never developed en masse. Still, it proved to be a very formidable ship, and rapidly became a crisis response and patrol craft for situations where conflict was expected. In the universe of STO, that is quite often, so you can see the Federation's need. The fact that it was created in-universe by Nog is a nice homage, and the fact that he goes on to captain the prototype even after its commissioning proper keeps him out there in the skies. Personally, I'd like it to have a little more sovereign class in its implementation, with dedicated suites for diplomacy and science too, and while all Starfleet ships have them to an extent, the Chimera's adaptability comes from its theatres of war, not its theatres. In practice, the ship itself is a mixed bag, which also sort of matches with its in-universe lore too. It certainly feels like it was designed by someone who learned their tactics and machinery on a Defiant. Just saying. Thanks for watching this breakdown on the formidable Chimera class of Star Trek Online. I've been Rick, and I'll see you later for another video. Until then, I hope you've had a lovely holiday. Take care, and goodbye.